I just had a conversation with someone who has become a professional cuddler and is about to do their very first session. And she's very nervous. And kind of before you do your first session, there's always a fear because you haven't actually done the thing, right? And the specific nervousness that she expressed to me is, what if this guy pushes the boundaries? What happens if they are expecting sex? And so I reminded her that this person has literally signed an agreement that they understand that the service is not sexual and that they understand what they're coming in for. So if they push the boundaries, they are the one being problematic. It is not her being problematic to maintain the boundaries. And I wanted to talk about this on a video because I think it speaks very directly to the larger conversation we're having in this country right now around consent and boundaries and men expecting sex in situations where women are not interested in sex and this gendered component, right? And the really deeply ingrained fear that a lot of women have around sexually disappointing men, right? We're afraid of being called a tease. I mean, I grew up with this idea that it was made you a terrible person if you got a man sexually excited and then didn't take care of the problem. Like, okay, guys, I think our language around this is an issue. This is that whole baseball is a terrible analogy for sex because if there's a loser in your sexual encounter, you're doing it wrong, right? But these are the ideas that we were raised with. And the culture is shifting, and that's hard, but it's good because the old one really sucked. And, not in the innuendo way, right? So this idea that boundaries might get pushed, and I've had potential clients message me and say, well, if I get aroused, you'll take care of that, right? Like, no. What part of not sexual service is unclear? And the answer to that question is the deeply ingrained idea that anytime people of differing genders are in the room, sex is in the undercurrent and might happen and is a thing to be aware of, whether you're afraid of it or excited about it, like it's always a possibility. Now, I presume most of the people watching this video are adults and have been in real life for a minute. And you know that real life is not like it shows up in a porn movie where sex could break out at any moment, sort of like the sexual version of a musical. But there's still that sort of undercurrent and understanding. And what I love about the professional cuddling world is we have a different understanding. I know that it's not mainstream. I'm pretty cool with that. If you know me at all, or have ever met me or followed me on Facebook or anything, you're pretty clear that I do not consider normal to be the highest thing I aspire to, right? So I'm good with sort of changing this culture. And one of the things that I've always been fascinated with in terms of historical figures who stood up to social pressure is the fact that they had an idea or a community behind them when they did it. Rosa Parks did not one day decide she wasn't getting off the bus. There was a planned, organized effort that chose her as its figurehead, right? If you don't know that story, do some Googling. It's a really cool, inspiring story. Katharine Graham, who was in charge of the newspaper that published the Pentagon Papers, stood up to the president, applying direct pressure to her. And she did that because she was standing up for the ideal of a free press. And so when I'm looking to create this business that is doing this very countercultural thing, and when I am in a conversation with someone who is asking me things like, well, of course, you will succumb to this pressure to provide a sexual service if I become aroused, I have not only an ideal of the importance of platonic touch as a healing modality behind me, but I have a community behind me. I know that there are other people doing this work. And so it is not simply a calculus of I personally might let this other person in the room with me down if I don't break my own boundaries. And there's nothing on the other side of that sort of teeter-totter. But what's actually true is there might be one person in the room with me who's going to be disappointed if I do the exact thing I told them I was going to do and provided a strictly platonic service. But on the other side of that scale are people that I know who support this work, who believe in this work, who have seen the power of this work, and who will understand that I'm betraying that idea and that community if I decide I'm going to do a thing that I said I wouldn't do. And that provides a lot of power for people in this industry and who have come into the community in some way, because they know that there are people who kind of have their back and who understand this work, and I think that provides a level of safety. And I think it's an important piece of what we are doing in terms of changing the culture. So I just wanted to share my thoughts on how this all plays into the Me Too movement and Time's Up, this understanding that sexual access to a woman's body or a man's body because someone has less power than you do is no longer assumed. And this is an old culture. It's going to die hard. It's going to die angry, right? This is not everyone's understanding this or willing to agree that this is how the world should change. But there are more and more people who understand it, and we become a community together, and we create a set of expectations that everyone has bodily autonomy, that sexual encounters should be not just no is no, but why in the world would you want a sexual encounter with someone who isn't excited about it? For heaven's sakes, that's obviously some people think it is fun, but let me tell you, it's so much more fun when people are into it. Mark Mason has a fantastic essay online called Fuck Yes or No, where he talks about this idea. Go Google that. It's a really good piece. And he points out, why would you want that? Why would you want to hug somebody who doesn't want to hug you? And I had to learn that the hard way, that if you met me 5 years ago, I likely would have said, I am going to hug you because I am a hugging person. And I have learned not to do that. So it's an evolving conversation. I'm really proud to be part of an industry and a profession that is helping to reframe those boundaries for people. So if you have questions about that, you can message me, you can email me, you can find me a bunch of places. So I love this conversation. If you'd like to engage in it with me, just let me know. Thanks.